What is the worst and dumbest conspiracy theory? Not only by the Vatican, by the Byzantine Empire, too, and miraculously at the same time, according to the book you're referring to, because they lost the Holy Lands and had to cover that up. I had to give a talk on that topic in university, and what makes it so dangerous is that it is rooted in an actual historical problem. Why were only 10 days added at the Gregorian calendar reform, when it should have been 13? But there are so many much more reasonable explanations than a couple of centuries were made up, because somebody wanted to be king and someone else pope in the year 1000 inches. My favorite part about that theory is that, sure, you probably don't have many primary sources in Europe while they're recovering from civilizational collapse. The only problem is how you just have to ignore the rest of the world for that period, the birth of Islam, the Tang dynasty, the classical period and collapse of Mayan civilization, who, funnily enough, are known for their top-tier calendars, were also made up by the Pope, I guess. Similarly, that there was a lost, technologically advanced global empire called Tartaria that collapsed in the mid-1800s, and for some reason it's been entirely wiped from history except for its architecture. Examples of Tartarian architecture include the Arc de Triomphe, Old Chicago, and most late Middle Ages castles. At its core, it's similar to the Graham Hancock style history is lying to us, but unlike the younger Dryas theories, which are still dumb but mostly hinge on but we don't have evidence it's not true, the conspiracy requires significantly more heavy lifting to explain how none of this society survives except for a very specific invisible aspect. Check out our Tartaria for the wildest rabbit hole you will go down today. Seriously, they found someone who plays amazing quality left-handed bass guitar, left-handed guitar, and piano. Plus the signing voice sounds exactly like Paul's, and he looks exactly like Paul, has a perfect Liverpool accent, same height and weight, and has been writing amazing songs now for 50 years. Then they try and show you some picture of when he was like 22 compared to picture of Paul when he was 32 and make it seem like there are little differences, like, you can take any crappy picture of me at any age and compare it to an older picture and I look different, because people are constantly changing. However, you can also find pictures of Paul in his 30s and 40s where he looks exactly like he did when he was 22, just older. So Paul got into an accident, and when the paramedics got to the scene and took the body to the morgue, instead of filing up the info of the deceased, they decided to first call Brian Epstein to tell him the guy he manages is dead, and then they wait for him and the band to tell them to keep the death a secret instead of calling his family and doing the normal procedures, because the theory makes no sense. I had a discussion with a coworker about this recently because she does fully believe that the Paul McCartney alive today is a fraud and may have had a little too much fun poking holes in it. She believes that the current McCartney is a clone because the Illuminati has had cloning tech since the 30s, and I was happy to point out that if that was true, then why did Van clone a random ass baby from Liverpool, because that would have had to have been the case unless they also had the technology to more or less rewrite DNA to advance the clone's aging, which would have resulted in an advanced age McCartney dying sometime in the 80s. And even at that, just because they're a genetic copy doesn't mean the copy will be equally as skilled musically. Hilariously, I used identical twins as proof of this, and said coworker was like, oh yeah, I have an identical twin and we're polar opposites. But even if it were true, look-alike or clone, why would they do that? The Beatles broke up just a few short years later. What would have been the end goal with replacing McCartney at all if he passed? That is the one thing I have never understood with this theory. In the new Irish exiles, however, many Protestants saw a papal plot at work. According to Conspiracy Theories in American History, an encyclopedia, some Protestants feared the Pope and his army would land in the United States, overthrow the government and establish a new Vatican in Cincinnati. They believed the Irish would impose the Catholic canon as the law of the land. History. The idea that Irish immigrants were agents of the Pope working to establish a third Rome in Cincinnati is just hilarious to me. The idea of loyalty to religious site over country has been used historically against American Catholics, Muslims, and especially Jews, even though in reality it's been American Protestants who are most likely to try to impose their religious rules on non-members. The fear is that loyalty to the Vatican, Pope, Mecca, or Israel, Jerusalem will be stronger than loyalty to America, and they'll try to take over in the name of their homeland or something. Those are the best, especially when after the date comes and goes the person making the prediction does a recalculation and explains they did the math wrong and gives a new date. Like shit man, you're predicting the end of the world, you might want to check the math a few times. I think there is a documentary that followed up on some of the followers who blew their life savings and had nothing to their names when the dates came and went. I remember my ex-mother-in-law was so paranoid about 2012. She bought tons of canned food, water bottles, and asked everyone to make a grab bag with extra clothes, shoes, etc. I remember the week of December 2012. She kept insisting that we all gather as a family to spend our last day on Earth. Her children laughed at her, and honestly, I did too. I even said something like, "So if the Earth is ending ... why did you buy all this stuff?" She was puzzled. I left to my grandparents until the last day of December. I couldn't hear one more end of days bullshit. When I came back, I asked her, "So rain check, this is the same person who believes the COVID vaccines will alter our DNA." What I find stupidest about this conspiracy is that everyone I've spoken to who believes it agrees that a child aged between 1 and 10 would be kidnapped and kept on Mars for decades. Then decades later that child is still being used as a child sex slave. So, like, these kids are kids forever, or is it a 45-50-year-old child? So a 10-year is kept in an underground mine on Mars for decades and then used as a child sex slave, so they're talking about 35-year-olds being used as child sex slaves. I just feel that the people who believe this are so stupid they don't understand the basics of the words they're saying or how illogical these things are. I remember reading that article about some Republican senator or representative who spouted that load of garbage, and when I sent it to my friends laughing, one of my buddies looked at our friend, who was Jewish, and was like, "Bro, you're telling me you had a space laser this whole time and never let me blow anything up?" I laughed so hard. I still can't believe that an actual representative in the United States government believes this. The whole purpose there was so much coverage of the Holocaust was because lots of people didn't think the public would believe how bad it was. They made sure to document as much as they could just to show the sheer effect it had, and now there's idiots claiming it didn't even happen. That's some deep-seated Marianism. Someone on Reddit tried to deny the Holocaust. I mentioned my grandparents, who survived concentration camps and lost many of their family members to the Nazis. I asked what benefit they could possibly have gotten by lying about it. The bastard didn't even try to come up with any kind of logical reason why they would make up such a thing. He just asked if we had any death certificates proving they were killed in camps, and if not, my family was clearly lying. Ah yes, because the Nazis were in the habit of writing up death certificates for the people they were genociding. Nah bro, I have proof. Think about this. Republicans deny global warming because they want the world to heat up. Why? Because reptiles love hot arid climate. Climate change causes there to be more mosquitoes, which is obviously what Mitch McConnell eats for meals. If you look at Ted Cruz, he ran away from Texas right when the big freeze happened this year. Reptiles can't survive the cold, as they need warm temperatures. Flies land on pants since he uses his hair as bug bait. He just couldn't eat it on live television as it would blow his cover. Finally, reptiles hate gays, weed, and abortion. I don't have proof yet, but tell me something. Have you ever seen a South American iguana smoke weed while having gay sex? I think not. That Sandy Hook, or any other mass shooting or tragedy for that matter, was a false flag operation designed so the government can come take your guns. You had fucking lunatics writing books called Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, which was a total slap in the face to all of the family members who lost loved ones, especially the ones who lost their little children. Yeah, that one makes me so angry. It's the one conspiracy theory ever that I have lost friends over. It is so disrespectful to those who are lost and their families and friends. To try to deny that real people died is just unbelievable. These are real people that you can look up and find records of their lives, and they are suddenly not here anymore. How in the hell could anyone pull that off? Thousands upon thousands of people would have to be involved and keep quiet. I burn up inside every time I think about this one. Vaccines cause autism. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. First, why it's the dumbest. The disgraced former doctor turned fake pseudo-TED talker, Andrew Wakefield, who published the study, is a man with a complex who is well known to have foregone any actual care of patients for the chasing of research prestige in pursuit of his father and grandfather's legacy. I mention this because it shines a different light on the study he published linking the MMR vaccine to the occurrence of autism in children. He, by admission to and of friends and family, was desperate to cement his name in medical history, to the point of a refusal to thoroughly check his results before declaring a breakthrough. No other study has corroborated his hastily done and poorly sampled study. This is not science. In addition, any actual medical professional, scientist, or person with a computer and a shred of capacity for reason can connect the dots to show that the more likely explanation is that the first signs of autism and other cognitive impairments appear first around the same time that the MMR vaccine is typically administered. You don't need a chi-square test to tell you that this doesn't pan out. On to why this is the worst. The anti-vaccine movement that rose from the ashes of the pseudoscientific baloney has been the greatest tragedy of the modern era. It took hardly any time for this to become apparent. More cases of measles have occurred in the developed world in the past year than any other in recent memory, and these are tied entirely to communities where the vaccination rate was exceptionally low. It is now the reason that this pandemic is not fully finished off in the United States and well on its way out in the rest of the world. We will likely never see COVID completely disappear as a result of vaccine hesitancy brought on by this conspiracy and its effects. This is worse than any other conspiracy theory. While you may find the guy who won't shut up about how the CIA shot Kennedy, we never landed on the moon, and the Earth is flat, insufferably annoying, these are basically harmless in comparison. Nobody, to my knowledge, has died or become gravely ill as a result of these other common conspiracy theories. The anti-vaccine movement will be the greatest obstacle in the continuing progress of medical science in the coming century, in my opinion. I hold autism speaks in part accountable for the COVID disaster for this reason. They continued beating the dead horse for years after the link was fully disproved, and have irrevocably damaged both the quality of life of every autistic person in America as well as caused increased vaccine hesitation, which has harmed many children. Edit, slight rephrase. I don't only blame us for the way the pandemic went the way it did, but it certainly has blood on its hands. And honestly, if the rumor was true and I had to choose between an autistic kid or one with tetanus, I'd pick the autistic one. I don't understand how leaving your kid susceptible to deadly diseases is even an option, and having a kid with autism isn't as horrible as people think, as we only see severe cases in the media. There are practical reasons for the belief that vaccines cause autism. 1. There is no blame on the parents. Used to be a theory that autism was caused by mothers who did not bond with the kid. 2. If vaccines cause autism, then maybe parents can tap into the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program to pay for treatment. Imagine every low-functioning autistic kid gets expensive one-on-one therapy in a professional setting all day. Higher-functioning kids still get compensation. Not only this, but there was a decent conflict of interest here since his study was funded by groups with a competitor to the standard MMR vaccine. If it could be proven unsafe, they would have had a case to introduce the replacement. Wakefield intended to market testing kits for the condition he was trying, and failed. to prove existed, and he received hundreds of thousands from a law firm with open cases on vaccine injuries. None of this was disclosed, and he had to go so far as fabricate data and outright refuse an offer to rerun his study on a larger cohort just to try and maintain the potentially lucrative lie. The irony is when anti-vaxxers quote his paper to claim that their beliefs are sticking it to big pharma and dirty industry money, it's actually the exact opposite. Dirty money and bad science is exactly why Mr. Wakefield is no longer Dr. Wakefield. He also was alleged to have performed many invasive, unapproved, and thus highly unethical procedures on children in an effort to prove his theory. Including colonoscopy on children, paying children for blood sample children, and CBI colonoscopy. Dr. Wakefield, John Walker Smith, and Simon Merck are accused of ignoring limitations placed on them by the Research Ethics Committee of the Royal Free Hampstead NHS Trust and subjecting children to procedures that were not clinically indicated, including lumbar punctures, barium meals, general anesthesia, and colonoscopy. Andy Kaufman faked his death in the 80s and assumed the identity of then-eccentric billionaire Donald Trump. Donald Trump was at the peak of his career and wanting to retire, and they conspired for him to vanish from public view so Kaufman could take on what he would consider his magnum opus. Kaufman, as Trump, began saying more and more outlandish things. His business ventures went sideways. He started a television show where he fired people with his kids, and the real estate mogul even began selling steaks. Andy Kaufman is truly a master of acting. This one is actually very slippery because who has first-hand knowledge of all the data? Like, if you already think that the government collected statistics are lies, and you think the news media tells incorrect information, then what's to stop you from thinking this? This kind of theory boils down to why would everybody conspire to lie about it? There just isn't anybody gaining off of the situation very much. Canon is going to be a huge topic in future studies of human psychology. The fact that so many people were convinced that this conspiracy was real, even as every single major prediction they make is proven wrong and none of the big events come to pass, is mind-boggling. People have gotten themselves so deep into this conspiracy theory that no matter how many times it gets disproven, people continue to believe it and just move the goalposts. It shows just how much we as a species want to believe something we like. Even if it's blatantly false, we'll just rewrite reality and move the goalposts to continue believing in it, even though it holds absolutely no benefit to us. Nothing has made me lose faith in humanity more in my 37 years than the mass acceptance of canon. I know it sounds dramatic or whatever, but when I hear people talking about it openly in public with each other, like it's not the most insane thing they've ever heard, I can imagine it's how normal-thinking people felt in the 30s when they heard soon-to-be Nazis openly talking about how Jews were ruining the world and something needed to be done. I can understand why radical extremists drove planes into the World Trade Center more than I can comprehend why mass amounts of people would buy into nonsensical conspiracy theories created by an internet troll and dedicate their lives to supporting it. This might not be the dumbest, but that is the one pissing me most off. I have a colleague telling me vaccines make you magnetic. It pisses me off because there is a lot of talented people working non-stop to make this amazing feat of creating a new vaccine so fast using new technology. And hillbillies like that guy straight up talk dumb shit even though no one asked. We tried with a coin, and my father-in-law said it was magnetic. Bro, first of all your whole family needs to be mental checked. Second, our coins are not magnetic. These retards spreading lies and fear, while all the smart people made this happen. That one hurts the most. That the government is capable of executing any large-scale behind-the-scenes scam on the American public. It is not possible, period. As a government employee, we have sat in meetings debating where a comma should go in a piece of legislation for over 4 hours. I have seen people nearly come to blows over parking spots, bathroom stalls, who gets to take lunch at what time, and who has to work the Christmas holidays. There is no chance that the necessary level of manpower to execute the large-scale scam would actually come to fruition. There are too many people, from too many walks of life, many who are very principled in their beliefs of working for the government and making the world a better place. Is it possible for an agency to get away with something for a short while? Sure. We know the NSA did it before they were exposed, but is it possible for a multiple departmental group across all levels of government to execute a grand plan? Not even remotely possible. Someone would talk and bring the whole thing down. Our government will just write into law and shove in your face.